Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the first book of Kings. That's Melachim Aleph. We are in the middle of Perek Bet, that's chapter 2. We are about to read verse 13. In the first 12 verses, we read of the David's final words to his son Shlomo and how David passed on, and Shlomo took over the throne. And the last of the words that we read were Vatikon Malchuto Me'od, that his kingship was firmly established as on the throne, with all potential contenders subdued, at least for now. And David also gave him instructions of some loose ends he needed to tie up, which was his advice to Shlomo to make sure that Shlomo would have a solid hold on the kingdom. So this rest of this chapter is going to deal with Shlomo really wrapping up these loose ends and getting rid of those who would potentially ruin his ability to rule a united kingdom. So the first troublemaker that we've heard about was Adoniyahu, was David's own son, who notably David himself did not give Shlomo instructions what to do with Adoniyahu. One would imagine because David was he never criticized his own son Adoniyahu and never was willing to recognize the evil that he had done. And David was also, we know his relationship with Avshalom, despite his rebellion, how sad he was upon his death. So it makes sense that David didn't give Shlomo instructions what to do with Adoniyahu. So the first act that we heard of Shlomo doing at all was when he pardoned Adoniyahu and said, I won't kill you as long as you remain faithful and you don't rebel. So we're going to read as to whether or not Adoniyahu really kept that promise and what Shlomo did about it right now. So, Vayavo Adoniyahu ven Chagit el Batsheva. After this happened, Shlomo was the king. Adoniyahu came to Batsheva. One gets the impression that this was early on in his reign. Shlomo, Batsheva, of course, who was Shlomo's mother. Interestingly, we don't have a lot of narrative from Batsheva's perspective. We have really none. We don't hear much about what she thinks, what she was like, her experience, how she felt. And it makes one wonder, it's just to think about, Batsheva and what she felt about David, what she felt about Shlomo, what she felt about her situation. But here we're going to have a little bit. The only thing we heard of her was that she was an object, really. She was taken in by David into his house, married. We heard about the son that she lost. We heard about her Shlomo being born. And then the next thing we hear was when she approached David and asked him to fulfill his promise and appoint Shlomo as king. Over here, Adoniyahu comes to Batsheva. Bartomer hashalom boecha. And she says to him, are you coming in peace? In other words, are you coming here to make trouble? Are you coming here to make a fight? Or do you have something peaceful? Vayomer shalom. He says, yeah, I'm coming in peace. I want to have peace. So Adoniyahu convinced Batsheva, Vayomer, and he said, Davar li elayach. I have something I want to talk to you about. Vatomer daber. So she says to him, speak. And she apparently gives him the benefit of the doubt. He said he's coming in peace. Okay, let's hear what he has to say. Vayomer, and he says, At Yadat Kili Hamelucha. You know, Kili Haita Hamelucha, that the kingdom was here for me to be taken. I should have been king. V'olai Samuchal Yisrael Paneim Limloch. And all of the people of Israel looked at me to be the king. Now, this is not at all, even remotely close to the truth. Those of us that studied together just the last chapter, the first chapter of this book, saw how happy the people were when Shlomo was chosen king, and how the people celebrated, and how no one was really celebrating when Adoniyahu declared himself the successor of David. But in his mind, in his narcissistic mind, all of Israel wanted him to be king. However, Vatisov HaMelucha Nonetheless, the kingdom was taken away from me and given to my brother. Because it was God that decided that he should be king. So this sentence is full of narcissism and arrogance, but somehow that kind of got missed by Bathsheba, as we'll see in a moment. And now in other words, he's presenting himself as if he was wronged, as if the world owes him something. He should have been king, but since I'm not king, at least give me one thing, and that is one thing I'm going to ask you. Al toshivi et panai, please don't turn me away. Vatomer loved daber, and she said, okay, speak. He has her ear. Vayomer, and he says to her, Imri no Shlomo HaMelech, please, you speak to King Solomon. Ki lo yashiv et panayach, he won't turn you away. He'll listen to you. V'yiten li et Avishag hashunamit li'isha. Let me have Avishag, the woman from Shunam, as a wife. Avishag was the beautiful young woman who was brought to be a caretaker for David when he was in his final days. And I want her to be my wife. Let Shlomo give her to me as a wife. That's all I want. He presented it in such a way. She's a beautiful woman. I love her. I want her. Send her to me. So in all innocence, so to speak. That's all I want. Vatomer Bathsheba tov, and Bathsheba says, good, that's fine. If that's all you want, then it's fine. Anochi adaber alecha al hamelech, I will speak on your behalf to the king. Now, Bathsheba is being presented here as someone who just doesn't get what he really wants. And what he clearly really wants is, by marrying the king's concubine, the former king David's concubine, he is asserting himself into a position of being king, which is something that we've seen many times. We saw this when Avner was accused by Ishbosheth, Saul's son, of sleeping with his concubine as an act of treason, showing that he wanted to take over and be the king himself. And we saw this with Avshalom. The first thing he did to assert himself as king in his rebellion against his father was sleep with David's concubines. So this is clearly a maneuver, not just meant to marry her because she was beautiful, but he wanted to marry her because he wanted to position himself in a place where at the right moment he can present himself as king. He wanted the legitimate trapping of kingship by marrying the king's concubine. Vatomer Bathsheba tov. Okay, I read that. It was verse 18. So, verse 19, Vatovo Bathsheba al Melech Shlomo. Bathsheba came to the king Solomon, l'daber lo al Adoniyahu, to speak to him regarding the request that Adoniyahu had made. Vayokom hamelech likrasa. The king got up to greet her. Vayishtachula. He bowed to her. He respected his mother. And bowed to her. Vayeshev al kiso. He sat on his throne. Vayasem kisei le'em hamelech. And he placed another throne right next to his for the king's mother. Vateshev limino. And she sat to his right side in a very honorable position. Vatomer, and she says to him, She'el achas ketana nochi shoalas. I have a small request to ask of you, me'itach, from you. Al toshev et panai, please don't turn me away. Vayomer la hamelach sha'ali imi, he said, my mother, speak to me. Ki lo ashiv et panayach, I will not turn you away. Vatomer, and she said, Yutanet avishaga shunamit la adonio achich liisha. That it should be given, Abishag, from the woman from Shunam, should be given to Adoniyahu, your brother, as a wife. Vaya'an hamelach Shlomo vayomer li'imo. And the king Solomon answered and said to his mother as follows: V'lama at shoelet Avishag shunamit la'Adoniyahu. Why are you asking that Avishag should be given to Adoniyahu? V'sha'alilo et hamalucha. Shlomo was obviously upset. He realized this was a ploy simply to get into a better position to launch a coup attempt to take the kingdom away from Shlomo. You might as well just ask, you might as well just ask that I give over the kingship back to him. Kihu achi hagadol mimeni. Isn't he the big brother? V'lo ve'Eviatar HaKohen v'Yoav ben Tzruya, and he has those two guys that were with him, Eviatar the Kohen and Yoav ben Tzruya. They were out there helping him. So he has him and his buddies. This is all part of their coup attempt. You might as well just have said it straight up. Vayishava HaMelech Shlomo b'Adonai Lemar. And the king Shlomo swore by God's name as follows: Ko ya'aseh li Elohim v'cho Yosef ki b'nafsho diber Adoniyahu es hadavar hazeh. That literally, that translation is so may God do to me, and so may He continue to do, right? Because I clearly, when Adoniyahu spoke this thing, he is trading away his life for that, because he deserves death for that. V'ata, and now Chai Adonai, he swears by God's name, by God's existence, Asher Achinani v'yoshivani al kisei David Avi, that He has established me and He put me to sit on the throne of my father David. Vasher Asali Bayes Kasher Diber, He created for me a home, a house, meaning the house of David, the house of kingship. As He spoke, He would, as He said He would. Ki hayom yimatz Adoniyahu, I swear that today I'm going to put Adoniyahu to death. Vayishlach HaMelech Shlomo biyad Benayahu ben Yehoyada vayifkabo vayamos. And Shlomo took his trusty general, now Benayahu ben Yehoyada, the one who stood by his side throughout all of the trials. He sent him, and he struck him down and killed him. So that was the end of that threat. Shlomo had promised not to kill him if he behaved himself, but he very quickly showed that he was still scheming to take over the kingdom. In verse 26, now we're going to move on to some of the other people who are problems. Leviatar HaKohen, he went to Eviatar the Kohen. Remember, Eviatar was a loyal servant of David for most of David's life, except at the end, Eviatar helped Adoniyahu. He became the priest for Adoniyahu while Adoniyahu was trying to become the king. Amar HaMelech, the king said to him as follows: Anatot lech al sadecha. Go to Anatot. Anatot was a city of priests. Go to your fields over there. Go to your home there. Ki ish maves ata, because you are a person who deserves to die. Uvayom hazeh, but today lo amisecha, I will not execute you. Ki nasasa es Aron Adonai Elohim lifnei David avi, because you were there to carry the Ark of Covenant of God before David, when David was running. V'chi hisanisa b'chol asher hisana avi, and you went through all the trials and difficulties that my father went through. So you stood by his side, so I'm not going to kill you, even though you really deserve to die for this rebellion. So just leave, go to Anatot. Vayagar Shlomo et Eviasar, and Shlomo banished him, miyot kohen l'Adonai, from being a priest to God here in Jerusalem, in the capital, l'maled et var Adonai, asher diber al beit Eli b'Shilo, which in the end fulfilled the curse that God had made at the house of Eli. Remember, back in the beginning of the book of Shmuel, we learned how the house of Eli, who was serving in the tabernacle when it was in Shiloh, how the house of Eli was condemned to have no more descendants serving in the temple. And Eviatar apparently was a descendant of the house of Eli. By Shlomo banishing him, this was a fulfillment of that curse. So Eviatar was banished and no longer allowed to practice his trade, which was his trade being a priest. He had to go back to working his field back in his hometown, Anatot. So now, that's what he did to Eviatar. The next obvious person who needs to be dealt with is Yoav. And remember, of course, Yoav, we're going to read again a little review about why what Yoav did was so egregious. V'hashmuah ba'ad Yoav. And the news reached Yoav, the news that Shlomo had executed Adoniyahu, had banished Eviatar. Yoav knew that he's obviously next. So the news came. Ki Yoav nata achrei Adoniyahu. And because Yoav had been part of the rebellion and had supported Adoniah, v'acharei Avshalom lo nata. However, in the previous rebellion of Avshalom, he did not go with Avshalom. He stood by David's side. So Yoav now knew that his time had come, and that the next victim of Shlomo's wrath was going to be him. So Vayanas Yoav elo el Adonai. So Yoav ran to the tent of God, in other words, to the place where the altar was. Vaychazek bekarnot hamizbeach, and he held on to the corner of the altar. similar to what Adoniyahu had done in the last chapter to try to save himself, because he wouldn't, Shlomo wouldn't come and take him and execute him at the side of the altar itself. Vayugadlu melech Shlomo, and it was told to the king Shlomo, Kinas Yoav el Adonai, that Yoav had run to God's tent, to the place where the altar was, and that he is standing next to the altar. And Shlomo sent Benayo, the son of Yehoyada, he's again his trusty military general. He said, "Go and strike him down." And Benayo came to the God's place, to the tent of God. And he said, "Ko amar hamelech, the king has commanded, say that you should leave. Vayomer lo, kifo amos. No, I will die right here. I'm not leaving." So Benayo sent back to the king what's happening. He sent him a message. Kodi ber Yoav v'cho. He said, this was the dialogue, the exchange between what I said and what Yoav said to me. Vayomer lo hamelach, and the king said, Asei kasher diber. He said that he's going to die here. He's not going to leave, so kill him there. Do exactly as he said. Ufagabo ukvarto. Strike him down even while he is at the altar. And you will remove the stain of the blood that he spilled for free. In other words, the wasted blood. He killed people that endangered me and my father's house. That blood that he had killed will now be avenged, and you will remove that stain. And God will avenge himself upon him. Literally, that means God will put his own blood down on his own head, meaning his own guilt will come back and haunt him. Asher paga v'shnei anoshim tzadikim. He struck down two innocent men. V'tovim mimenu. Those men were better than him. Remember, those were both men who had initially opposed David and had been the enemy, but they made moves and tried to bring the people back together. He struck them down with the sword. David lo yada, and my father David, he did not know. He did not command them to be killed. He wanted them to remain alive so he can bring about peace between the different factions. And who are those two people? At Avner ben Ner, Sar Tzvoi Yisrael. Avner, the son of Ner, who was the chief general in Israel. Viet Amasa ben Yetzer, Sar Tzvoi Yehuda. And Amasa ben Yetzer, who was the commander of the forces of Judah, remember, under Avshalom during the rebellion. But then David wanted to bring Amasa back, and he then appointed him over as general himself over his forces. And Yoav went ahead and killed both of them. V'shavu d'mehem berosh Yoav, may their blood, the guilt of their death, be come down upon the head of Yoav. Uverosh zaro le'olam, and on the head of all of his descendants forever. U'David u'zaro le'veso u'lechiso. And then once this is done for David and his children, meaning me, Shlomo, and my family, le'veso, and the house of David, u'lechiso, and the throne of David, yes, shalom, there shall be peace ad olam me'im Adonai, forever from God. In other words, Yoav represented the opposite of peace, and now we will bring about peace. Vayal Benayo ben Yehoyada. So he followed his instructions. Benayo went into the tent of God. Vayifkabo. He struck him down. Vayimiseo, and killed him. Vayikaver beveso bamidbar, and he was buried in his house out in the wilderness. Vayitain hamelach et Benayo ben Yehoyada tachtav al hatzava. So now that Yoav, who is still apparently the official commander of the army, the king appointed Benayahu to be the general instead of Yoav. Yet Tzadok HaKohen, and Tzadok the priest, who was loyal to Solomon, Natan HaMelech Tachat Eviatar, the king placed him in place instead of Eviatar, who had been banished. And now there is one more person that needs to be dealt with. That's Shimi ben Gera. Shimi ben Gera was also a potential contender, a person who had a lot of sway with the tribe of Benjamin and the people of Israel, as opposed to the people of Judah. Remember, those divisions had already existed. They're currently united, but those divisions existed. And Shimei saw himself as he tried to seek the opportunity to use Avshalom's rebellion in order to get rid of David and to reestablish the monarchy in the hands of the tribe of Benjamin through reinstalling a descendant of Saul. And then when Shimei saw that the rebellion lost, then he went ahead and started being loyal to David again. So he was backhanded. He was a two-timer. So Vayomer lo, so the king crawled out to Shimei, and he said to him, B'nei lecha bayis b'Yerushalayim, build yourself a house in Jerusalem. V'yashavta sham, and you will live there. V'lo tetzei misham onav onav, and you're not allowed to leave Jerusalem. In other words, he basically put him on house arrest. So the purpose being, Shimei out there and among the people, his people of Benjamin, can do all kinds of things. He can get people together. He can launch a rebellion. But as long as he's here, stuck in his house in Jerusalem, which is where the capital of the people of Judah was, and Solomon's throne was, Shimei won't be able to lead a rebellion. He won't be a threat without killing him, because remember, David had promised Shimei that he wouldn't kill him at a time when David was trying to bring the people together and make peace, and Shimei was then claiming to be loyal to David. However, if the moment you leave Nachal Kidron and you cross over the Kidron Valley, right, the Wadi Kidron, right, the minute you leave Jerusalem, that's it, you're dead. And Shimei, having seen Yoav executed and having seen Adoniyahu executed, realized this is actually a pretty good deal. So this is good. Just like you have commanded, that's what I will do. And for many days Shimei lived in Jerusalem. It was after 3 years of living in Jerusalem, under this house arrest. And two of Shimei's servants ran. They were running away. They wanted to get their own freedom. El Achish ben Maachah melech Gat, and they ran to Achish, who was the king of Gat, apparently a Philistine king. At this point, the Philistines still existed, but they were subdued. They were no longer a threat to Israel. But they ran to Gat in order to escape from him. And the message came back to Shimei saying that your servants are now in Gat. That's where they have reached. And Shimei, not wanting to lose his servants, and Shimei got up, he saddled up his donkey, he went to Achish in order to get his servants back. So Shimei went, and he brought his servants back from Gat. And it was told to Shlomo, Ki halach Shimei Yerushalayim Gat vayashov, that Shimei left Jerusalem. He went all the way to Gat and came back. The king called and summoned Shimei to the palace. Didn't I swear you by God's name? And I warned you, Lamar, saying, that the day you go out and go to anywhere, here or there, any place outside Jerusalem, that you're going to die. But Tomer Eli Tova Davar Shamati. And didn't you answer me and say, yes, this is a good deal, and that I hear, this deal that you're saying? Why did you not keep the promise that you made by God? The clear, explicit command that I commanded you. So the king said to Shimei, you know very well everything that was in your heart, all the evil that that you did to David. You know that you weren't truly loyal. You know that you were rebellious. And now God is going to take vengeance upon you for that evil that you had in your mind to do to my father. That's what God is going to do to you. However, the king Shlomo will be blessed by God. He's speaking of himself in third person. And the throne of David, that throne which you sought to take down, is going to be established before God forever. The king commanded Benayo, the son of Yoyada, and he went out and he struck him down and killed him. So that that took away a leader who could potentially have whipped up the northern tribes to rebel. Yoav, who was another leader who had who his attitude towards vengeance led to a difficulty in making peace with the other factions. Those two are gotten rid of. Adoniyahu, who was the chief contender to the crown, who had the serious potential of trying to set up a rebellion and taking down Shlomo, he was gone. And Evyatar, the priest, who has now been demoted, is no longer a priest, and he's banished from practicing his trade forever. And Sadok, the loyal priest, is placed. So at this point, the kingdom was secure in the hands of Shlomo. It is now set and secure, and Shlomo is going to lead. And in the next chapter, we're going to learn more about Shlomo and his the growth of his kingdom. Thank you so much for studying chapter 2 together. Looking forward to studying chapter 3 and many more chapters and the entire book of Kings together. Have a wonderful day.